Welcome to the Planet Trillion Trees podcast. I'm Eva Monheim.
And I'm Hal Rosner. We are both certified arborists through the International Society of Arboriculture. The purpose of our podcast is to encourage tree planting and proper tree care for our urban forests, which include neighborhoods, parks, and other open spaces.
We will also cover a myriad of tree topics, including the important role trees play in relationship to the climate crisis. Thank you for joining us.
Verdant Earth Educators provides dynamic in-person training and online learning opportunities for environmental and horticultural businesses. Owned by ISA-certified arborists and former university faculty, the Verdant Earth Educator team provides consultations on tree care and recommends climate-resilient opportunities for your valued green spaces. Verdant Earth Educators is all about seeding knowledge for success. Find Verdant Earth Educators at verdanteartheducators.com.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, Monheim Microphones. Monheim Microphones designs and handcrafts top-tier studio microphones and preamps right here in the United States in Hollywood, California. Their incredible line of innovative microphones and designs are used around the world by everyone from podcasters to top-charting record producers and singers. They recently released their new royalty microphone, Monheim Microphones' Unparalleled Excellence, monheimmicrophones.com.
Hear from the most influential and innovative voices in today's global garden community at the annual Andalusia Garden Symposium. Famed plantsman and garden writer Dan Hinckley, Sissinghurst's head gardener Troy Scott Smith, Welsh seasonal floral designer and author Lucy Hunter, and edible landscape architect and author Stephanie Bittner. Held on Friday, May 3rd at Andalusia Historic House, Gardens, and Arboretum in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, just outside Philadelphia. Tickets are on sale now at andalusiapa.org.
This podcast is being recorded on February 9th, 2024. Robert Lundgren has a Bachelor of Plant Science and Fine Arts minor from the University of Delaware and a Master of Landscape Architecture from the University of Pennsylvania. He worked at landscape architecture firms Olin and Andropogon and is now at the University of Pennsylvania working as the University Landscape Architect within the Facilities and Real Estate Services Division, shepherding a variety of landscape projects on the 300-acre campus Arboretum. He is an artist, an award-winning designer, and an avid naturalist. His responsibilities at Penn include research, campus planning, tree care and management, garden design, ecological and environmental initiatives, and maintenance protocols. Welcome to the Planet Trillion Trees podcast, Bob. We're so delighted you could be with us today.
Thanks, Eva. Glad to be here.
We just love University of Pennsylvania. We love what you guys are doing down there. And we wanted to find out how you actually, what was your circuitous pathway to get to work at Penn?
Wow.
Unless it was a direct pathway.
No, it wasn't direct. Well, I guess, landscape architecture, I think one of the questions that came up was why I'm a landscape architect. And I think I've always been exposed to the outdoors. My family was pretty much all artistic, and my sister's an artist. My dad was an architect. And so I knew about LA and I wanted to study that. I guess a close second was music or painting, but I ended up going into landscape architecture at the University of Delaware in plant science. And I worked at a few offices and went on to get my master's at Penn. And I worked at Andropogon and Olin while I was at Penn for a little bit. And then, frankly, the facilities folks came to me and said, well, do you want to work here? And I wasn't sure at first because it was facilities. And how it's funny how facilities has a certain kind of label, which I'm not sure I always Well, I definitely don't agree with it, but that's another story. But, I wanted to work at a public place. I was thinking state parks, maybe national parks, maybe local parks. And this seemed like a great opportunity to work in essentially a city park, because that's really what it is, a university, but it's very close to being one of the city's great parks. And that really got me. And so that's how I ended up there and said, this is a great opportunity. And I've been there ever since.
Bob, are you originally from the Delaware Valley, and did you have exposure to plants and horticulture growing up?
Yeah, I'm from Delaware, and I spent a lot of time outdoors. And I think that's probably most of it. I said my dad was an architect. I used to walk to all the schools I went to, elementary, junior high school, and he had designed all those schools. It was kind of unusual that we got to walk through the woods or through a development to a school that he designed. And, I always thought that those pathways, I still remember them, really is a great way to see the environment, walking and being outdoors and all that kind of stuff. And so I think that's what kind of sort of led me to plants. My uncle was a great gardener. By the time I got to Delaware, the whole plant world was fascinating to me. I always wanted to be a scientist because of all that, because, it just seemed so fascinating just walking around. And I lived by the Brandywine Creek or nearby. And so we used to walk around there a lot. And it's just fascinating. I don't know if that answered your question, but it's kind of one of the roots that led me here.
Well, there's certainly something to be said for a landscape architect that understands plants. And I've known you for a long time, and that becomes clear to me, that you fundamentally know how something should be properly planted and how established landscape needs to be maintained in terms of the collection of woody ornamentals and such.
Yeah.
Have you found that to be the case? Because you interface with so many other professionals.
Well, I want to put down the profession so much, but I was disappointed. I went to school with a couple other landscape architects, Chris Allen and Gary Smith, who were my classmates.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That's a powerhouse class.
Yeah. They were great guys, or are great guys. And coming from Delaware, we always thought it was interesting that, you came, not to put down Penn, but it seemed like most of the landscape architects were like big tree, medium tree, little tree, and a shrub. And that's about all they knew about it. It seemed like they were more concerned with the, proportions of the trees or how big they were or something like that, rather than, as a design sense, rather than the environment they can create. Because I think you can do both. You could say, here's a great tree. It has to be big or small or whatever, but it also represents so much of an environment. Once you plant it, it has a whole life of its own, and that can be celebrated or not. And I think that those, understanding those communities and how trees grow, there's so much more to landscape architecture in making those plants work. And like I said, an environment on their own. And I thought that was great having that Delaware background in plant science. And I wish more LAs did have, the plant bug, so to speak.
I found that when I wanted to be a landscape architect, I was at Penn State and they had it in the art department. And they said,
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you're not going to learn plants here. And I was like, what? Wait, what? This is landscape architect. And they said, no, you're going to learn about how to manage the space within a place. Doesn't have to do with plants. It has to do with space. And I was like blown away. I decided not to go into landscape architecture and went to get my art degree with my horticulture degree. And that answered my questions, To this day, I still wonder, how you can design. It's like being an artist and not knowing your paints or not knowing your canvases, the type of thing you're painting on or drawing on. You have to know the materials that you're working with.
Yeah, just like you're saying, it's like a stage set that they were like doing all stagecraft. Like, okay, let's make it look right, and it, it's.
I like that analogy. I like that analogy. Stagecraft.
Yeah, it's like, and it's still like that in a lot of ways. I think we're trying to sort of beat that door down, but it's tough. It's tough.
But I think you at Penn have a very broad knowledge of plant material. So that really makes you different, and you bring a different level of information to the facilities department that other people might not bring.
I agree. I do agree, yeah. And, in facilities, it's interesting how, I don't know, maybe we'll talk about that later, but it's a little bit about how it's maintained. And I think, when you get into the maintenance world, I think I was taking notes. I was looking at your questions earlier. People come in and plant these projects and then they all leave. And what happens then? And, people kind of not sure anybody really follows up on that. And acknowledges that these things do need maintenance and they're literally not a stage set because they are alive and they will change over time. And, I find that's kind of one of the big eye openers if you're going into landscape architecture to say, how is this going to work? And, what is going to happen? And we can't just replace it every 5 years or every whatever. It's a natural environment and it's going to change. And we need to sort of adapt to that change. And hopefully that change will adapt to what we need, which I think we try to do for sure.
You can't do a landscape plan without having a landscape plan in other words, a landscape maintenance plan to go with it. You just cannot. You cannot, because that maintenance plan is going to tell you how many times you're going to be in the landscape maintaining it, how much it's going to cost you to manage it. And we don't do that here. So we only give a half of the pie. We don't get the whole pie. And the half of pie can be really great. But if you don't understand the whole, then it makes it that much more difficult, especially when a maintenance team comes in and has no idea what the intention of the designer is. And that, if you have a design and you're the landscape architect and you say, this is how I would like to see it in the future as it develops and grows, and nobody's there to listen to you.
Bingo. Yes. If nobody's there to listen to you, that's so, in most places, I hate to say, are still like that.
I had the opportunity last week, Bob, to travel a little bit through the South, the American South, and spent some time in Auburn and got a tour of that campus informally, not by staff or anything. And, thinking now about the University of Pennsylvania's landscape and how it concentrated and dense and urban it is, Auburn was so open and expansive with all kinds of places, not only already developed, but for future projects. And I'm wondering what that's been like, because Penn is a, vibrant educational institution that also expands quite a bit. And I'm sure you have a lot of war stories in terms of preserving certain things and also maybe, not having success on the back end. Can you philosophically kind of give us an overview of how you view all that?
How do I do what? Fight the battles, you mean? Or
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because, what do we have? It's a little less than 100 acres of open space on campus. We have 300 acres totally, about 200 and some acres of buildings and parking lots and things. And so our open space, even though we did expand recently, 10 years ago, we added Penn Park, which was a 25-acre sort of athletic park space by the river. And that was great to sort of, kind of relieve the pressure that we need open space just to do stuff in. And one of the things we've actually said, I use the word stuff. And, we engineer these spaces. We have a campus full of buildings and the building wants to expand. And we do those fights like, wait a minute, this is a nice field for whatever, or this is a great planting or a great tree or something. Don't chop it down. And you're right. We have war stories. We lose some and we win some. And one of the, I think, factors that people sometimes understand is that when I say the word stuff, it's like there's a flower bed here, there's the ceremonial lawn here, there's the walkway, there's the whatever, they're all defined. But the stuff thing is like, where is it a little bit wild? Where can I throw a Frisbee that's not kind of going to hurt anybody, or that's not going to be, where can I sit and do something in those spaces that are sort of undefined? And I think that to me is even more important than losing a lawn or a tree somewhere in a lot of respects, because it's promotes that kind of nature that we're getting a little bit more, I think, removed from. And so, and we've won a lot of, it's interesting, I don't want to say fights, but, we've won a lot of minds over by saying how important the landscape is because it's a natural world. And whether say it might be a small little space, but, even deans and things understand that those little spaces might have more birds in them, or they might have places that there's leaves in there, and there might be places that makes it just a little bit more interesting. And I think that's a responsibility for a university to say, we need all these kind of spaces. And I thought that was interesting. I never really thought that would work as a strategy to say, we need these wild places. And it's amazing how more people are into that than I thought. But still, it's hard to see. We're building 1, 2, 3 buildings now that are going to take up open space. They're going to take 3, 4, 5 acres of that open space away. And I really don't like it. I'd rather them build either up or not build the buildings at all. But as you said, Hal, it's a preeminent institution and education is very important. And it's going to happen, I suppose. I'm not sure there's a threshold to what makes it, we cross the line where there's not enough open space anymore. But one thing I might want to add is that we've hired landscape architects that are going to make that intrusion onto that open space in the building, the landscape around it, much more appropriate. And so they're putting in way more responsible design. There's no more just lawn and little shrubs anymore. It's certain they are putting in environments, even if it's the size of a postage stamp, they're doing it the right way. And I think that's great that over the last 10, 15 years, we've convinced the powers that be that that's an important part of this project. So all the landscape architects, even engineers who do a lot of stormwater management, are recognizing that that's important. And so I like to think that even though we're eating up open space, we're doing it the best way we can.
Well, what's really interesting, I find that going down to the facilities building, because I have to confess, I come down there for tree meetings and what have you. And you have it looks like a very cohesive group of people. In other words, everybody wants what's best for the university in the facilities department. At least that's the way it seems to me. Whether it's your architects or whether it's you as a landscape architect or whether it's your facilities people, your grounds people, everybody wants to make the campus look good, feel good. And when you're in it, you want to feel like you're not in a city, but you are in a place, a special place that is a place of learning. And it's removed from the fast-paced, busy streets around you, highways, what have you. And I think every university wants to create a space that feels good to their students, but to be able to do it in a city, a major city like Philadelphia, is very difficult. And I have to say kudos to your university and your facilities team for being able to do it. And, for your team to be able to pull it off and have people come through there and say, what an amazing campus. Because I've heard it as I walk, I hear people saying, oh, this is so gorgeous. Like, this is so beautiful. Look at the trees. Look at the alley of trees. You hear that when people are walking, and it could be parents, it could be 2 adults that are faculty that are appreciating what they see. And I think that that's really important.
Oh, it definitely is. And that is one of our biggest challenges. And those are I guess that's our biggest challenge because we are probably the greenest campus in such a big city, I think pretty much anywhere. And there's a lot of great green campuses out there, but they're not in the middle of a 3 million or 2 million, whatever it is, populated city. And it's pretty rough. And not that I love Philadelphia and it's a great place and all, but it's a city. And there's a lot of pressure. And keeping that pressure at bay, or again, working with that pressure, because one of the great things about our campus is that we have pretty much an open door policy, and we always have. There's no gates, there's no private places, unless, there's sort of private places, but again, it's a city park. And I think letting that kind of relieving that pressure and allowing it to be part of the city is a plus. And I think that allows us to make it, have a little bit more, maybe, I'm not sure, control over it, but adapting to the environment. So, the campus itself is green. We do try to keep those buffers of all the street trees around the campus, even if it's kind of somebody else's property. We've done it with real estate properties in the campus. And I think that signal of green, I wish more was green in the neighborhoods for sure. But I think that as you get to Penn, you realize that it is another environment. And even when you see the street trees and all those things, you get a signal that, oh, this is kind of a special place. And I think that goes a long way in allowing it to be a park and allowing everybody to recognize that it's a park. And that, people, I guess, all like it. Like you said, our facilities folks are pretty close together at times, but we're all working for that same environment because I think all of them that work there love that environment and it's their home. I think that's one of the biggest things also is ownership. When they feel part of the campus, they want to make it nice too. And very rarely do our own people, kind of badmouth it. They want it to be nice too. And
I think you're right about that. One, you're calling it a park, but it also has a special status, and you are an arboretum as well. And I don't think there's many city arboretum in the country. Is that correct?
True. Certainly not. Yes, that's true. And not in a size of ours, again, a city like ours.
How many trees do you have on your campus? Do you have any idea?
Oh, yeah, about 6,520, I think, right now. But that comes in. That comes and goes because, we lose trees every year for whatever reason, construction, or they die off or something. So we replace trees every year as well. And, and the arboretum thing has been great. I think we've done the right thing to be an arboretum for as long as I've been there. I've been here almost 4 decades doing what I do. And when we first started, we worked with the Mars Arboretum as part of Penn, as part of Penn's world. I used to work with Ann Rhodes, and she used to have this binder that was like 1,000 pages of that old computer paper. I think it was done by Davey Tree. It was this great inventory of the trees. And ever since we had that, we used to it was very awkward, this database. But I think we did catalog the trees from, I think she started in 79 or 78 after the campus center was renovated. And I think we've done all the right things for an arboretum, but we never actually got it, established or got credit for it. And of course, it's different now. So maybe it's easier to do. I'm not sure. But, our curation, essentially taking care of when it's pruned, replacements, what's died off, what we're putting back, the sizes, we've been doing ever since that time. And I think that's led us to be, managing our tree collection as an arboretum. We've just always done it, and finally getting recognized as we're a level 2 now because we do the right things, and we have all the, we're doing all the right things to fit the criteria for an arboretum. That's been great because I think we need the PR. When people hear it's an arboretum, a contractor, a professor, a student sort of goes, whoa, what? And, for me, it's not that they always all do it, but some contractors actually come up and said, oh, are we allowed to drive on this lawn here for a second while we unload something? Because I know it's an arboretum. I never would have heard them say that 20 years ago. I would have been floored. And because contractors, nothing against contractors in a lot of ways, because I love them, but they can be thumbs sometime, as my mother. You can drive all over the place and make a big mess. So that level of recognition has actually done quite more than I kind of would have thought. And I wish we had done it many years ago, but it's really great that people are respecting it more. And I think that's huge.
You had mentioned a minute ago the engineers and landscape architects that are associated with new construction are bringing kind of an enlightened approach in terms of sustainable practices. And it reminded me, it's probably been about a decade that your department put out RFP for a document, essentially, if I'm remembering correctly, that was just going to address sustainable. I think it was the first time I was starting to hear these words: sustainable landscape practices, biorational. I think it's all kind of coalesced now into ecological landscape practices that's kind of been popping up as horticulture kind of evolves to embrace more of the issues associated with sustainability and fossil fuel usage.
Right.
And I guess just to circle back, how has that worked out for you? What are some practices that you love to see in action when you're touring the campus?
Well, specific practices, I think, I'm not sure the RFP you're thinking about, but it may be the one about doing a study was that what it was for?
Yeah, that's right. I confess I'm a little fuzzy there.
That could be what we call the Ecological Landscape Stewardship Plan, ELSP. And, that took a look at a lot of our management practices. And Eva, because you're involved in some of the training of our folks at Penn grounds, what that looked at was how we do things. And generally with management, it was talking about not only what we plant annuals or perennials or grasses or native ground covers as opposed to English ivy and things like that. But it also talked about, and I think one of the interesting things was, if you look at the way our gardeners over the years have, their program has been to go in and kind of take off some dead wood on this tree here. Or I should go the other way around, put some mulch in this bed here. And if there was a dead branch right there, they're not supposed to do that because they're there to do mulch. You're not supposed to take the branch off because that's another task. And, I thought that was interesting that, well, first of all, that was happening. I can understand it in some ways for sure, because then if you start taking dead wood off trees while you're doing mulch, you're not going to get the mulch done as fast. And it's kind of one of those things. But one of the concepts that this plan, the ELSP, said was, can we move into more adaptive management where you do a little bit of mulch, or maybe it's not while you're doing mulch, but while you're planting flowers or while you're tying back some bulbs or pruning back something. If you see dead wood, take it out. If you see a little bit of plant over there, if you see a weed over there, take that out and try to look at those beds more wholly and holistically. And I think that's what ecology is. I think that's what, I'm not sure if sustainability is really the same thing, but maybe it's turning into that now. That's really trying to get people to look at the environment as a whole. And when you look at this bed, it shouldn't have dead branches on it, shouldn't have a weed over there. And you're looking at the bed, which helps, and that's better for the bed, but it's better for the gardeners and it's better for everybody when you're having this holistic approach. And I thought that's always been missing at Penn because we're, in a sense, yes, we do all get along, Eva, but we are in silos in a lot of ways. And those silos are less silo-ish now than it was years ago since I've been here because they are interacting more and seeing similar goals. But, I think that holistic approach has been really fabulous for how we look at things. And I think the administration and the VPs are also looking at that. And part of that plan was that management approach, but also things like grasses, things like perennial plantings, equipment we have, how to do things, how we get from one place to another. So it kind of put a focus on how do we take care of this place? Nobody's done that before. And that's really great. I think we should keep doing this more because a lot of the programs within that study are kind of, I wish they were more entrenched, but we're getting them.
How does your sustainability master's program or your environmental master's program interplay with the landscape itself on the campus?
Well, it depends on which one you're talking about. We have environmental studies. We have the graduate programs at Weitzman Graduate School for like in landscape architecture. And we have in biology, there's a couple schools and programs that we interact with. I think it's great because what we're doing, sustainability at Penn focuses mainly on energy use. So turn out the lights, try to get something better to save air conditioning or whatever. So those are the big ticket items, solar energy, wind energy, things like that. Coming to, how our landscape is more sustainable, again, goes to stormwater management. How are we making sure that we're not throwing millions of gallons of water down the drain where we don't have to? And that has been great. Our stormwater management programs over the years have diverted hundreds of thousands of gallons of water. Either we reuse them or we divert it so it doesn't go down some 200-year-old sewer that's about to break. So that's made a big difference and allowed us to do kind of marsh, rain garden, meadow plantings. And it gives us the kind of excuse to do those great plantings. But the students being involved in these things, they're constantly coming over and either helping us. We've had interns come over, help us monitor some of these rain gardens. We've had people over the biopond, Caskey Park, doing birding studies with Chloe, my colleague, Chloe Cerwinka. And that's been something that I never really thought would happen. So, we're having more hands-on appreciation of what we do, and they learn from that as well. It's interesting. We're doing something right now with the graduate students in landscape architecture, looking at like a college house we just built a few years ago. Here's the drawings for it. Here's the planting plans for the college house. This one has been in 5 years. So what's on the drawing? What's on the planting plan? And what's there now? And it's just great because they didn't really have much exposure to that. And so they look at these plans that are beautiful plans and what's left there. And I could tell good and bad stories about that kind of thing. But it's eye-opening to them because they just go, what? Why isn't this being taken care of? Or what happened to the so-and-so? Or look, this took off and grew and that one didn't. And they don't really get that in landscape architecture, going back to some of our previous comments, that there's really no plant education, I think, in my mind here, as much as there should be. A little bit. But I thought that was great with the graduate students. And they're really having fun looking at that, because a beautiful drawing is one thing, but reality is something else.
That is a beautiful quote right there, Bob.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Again, looking at the campus and its urban presence or its presence in the urban landscape. Let's talk a little bit about species, just because it's the Plant a Trillion Trees podcast. And I'm thinking you've seen a lot of success stories and you've seen the failures, and we're talking shade trees at this point, that have worked out or continue to languish. Any major principles that you'd like to share with the listeners in terms of what to think about with those intensive urban plantings?
One thing is we have to keep trying. I think we can't be put off by something going wrong. I don't know why I say that, because sometimes we plant trees and they might not make it because of whatever reason. And we have to keep pushing that you have to water them. You have to keep maintaining them after they're planting. And that has become, one of the things that we've done on projects is putting in more like a 2-year warranty and guarantee period so that the contractor takes care of it, establishes it, and it's ready to go for us 2 years later. But, I think all in all, do we plant species that we think are going to do well? Being plant people, we kind of know which ones to plant. So I think, overall, we're doing pretty well. Now, being a plant person, I know what to plant and a lot of things still die off. So I don't understand what's up with that. But one of the things I think are interesting, and I think you know about this, well, I know you do, Eva, and how these communities, I'll go back to communities again. If we plant little guys, I think of the project we're doing now, they want to put in 7-inch or 8-inch caliber trees as a replacement. And I think that's great because for a new building we're building. I'm not such a huge fan of that unless they're really taken care of and we're really doing everything we can to, nurture such of a large tree. And, sometimes that works. And we also plant 3.5 and 4-inch. But I'm surprised at how the little groves, well, you're tiny forests, Eva.
Yeah.
You have that word. They're forests, but a lot of places we've planted smaller trees in groves. And I think because they're buddies, they talk to each other and they okay, we're all little red maples here. And I swear that makes a huge difference in planting trees. So I'm not sure we, need to. I think that's just one of the strategies that works, that if we can try to plant something that is really appropriate and almost think of them in the environment that they're being planted in. If somebody wants a white oak and it's not the right place for it, we got to say, look, you might want to plant a maple here instead because of this reason. And I think that's considering the environment where the tree is planted is so important. And I go back to the old adage, right plant, right place, or whatever it is. Isn't that what it is?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Right tree, right location.
And and a lot of people, the designers, the deans of the schools, they have no idea about this stuff. And they might want this row of trees going along here and that kind of thing. You have to kind of work with them and kind of say, are you sure you want to do that? And in several jobs where we had, okay, here's an alley of trees, it might be okay, but what happens if you put a little group of trees, open space, a little group of trees? This kind of has the same kind of effect, but those group of trees are going to do a lot better than just big regimented row. That also in years to come, if one goes, then the row is all upset and it's wait a minute, they're not even. And that's another thing. So I think that a little bit more informal planting, if that's the word, makes a big difference. Not sure if I answered your question.
I think you're right. And you also you read something about red maples, and typically red maples don't get planted in cities because they have such shallow roots. But because of where you're located and the land that you have, you might be able to do a group of red maples, and they do really, really well. But to plant a solitary one along a sidewalk, right next to a sidewalk, it's not going to work. And that's where you can say it's not going to work here because they have shallow roots and because it's going to lift up the sidewalk and because it's not going to get enough water. And when it's dry or hot, it's going to suffer. I mean, those are the kind of things. And when you have that information and you can pass that on to whoever's asking, then they say, oh, I didn't know that.
I think that's a really good point, because when you have that information, I think people generally want to do the right thing.
Yep.
And I think if you have a specific, like you said, here's all this information. Oh, that makes sense. So, well, what do you want to do? And having that time, which I think has evolved over the years, that they start to listen to landscape architects or gardeners or horticulturists. I think it's become maybe a little bit more of a profession that people care about. And then once you have that door open, then you tell them the facts. I think people understand, easily. I mean, they definitely understand, and they understand what you do and go along with it. Now, sometimes they don't.
Well, kind of equate that to a doctor who tells a patient, you can take this medication, but these are the side effects.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with plants. You can plant that there, but these are the side effects. And I think people understand. Funny. I think people understand better because there are side effects from planting that particular plant. One of the things I think is really great about your campus is you have a huge diversity. Not only do you have a huge diversity of people on your campus, but you have a huge diversity of plants. And, I was doing a lot of my research for my grad program was landscapes reflect who's there. I think that landscapes always reflect who's there or who's not there. And I think that Penn has a really good way of being really diverse in their plant palettes to represent that diversity, not only in the city, but all those people that are there and making them feel comfortable there too. And I think that's also another important part about your landscapes at the campus, in a park, in an arboretum.
And one of the things we're, doing, you guys know, I guess we're planting live oaks now. And what do we have? 5, 6, 7? I forget how many we have. And they've been doing great. Now, that's kind of stretching our collection a little bit to the south for obvious reasons. And, so far they're doing well. We got them from the Morse Arboretum. Right. They've been growing them. I think Tony Aiello, he used to work the Arboretum, got them from one of the northernmost.
I think it was right near Richmond, Virginia.
Where was it? Near Richmond? Is that where it was? And, they've been growing them out, the Arboretum, and then we took them and put them in the city. We have a couple on street trees. We're trying them there. And we have we have a couple in the interior campus that sort of doesn't really matter, but it's stretching our, collection to one direction to see how they're going to do. So far, they're doing great. And I think that's part of our strategy is to try to, expand our collection, have a lot of diversity here and, see how they do it. It's a lot of ways. It's like we've said this before, like a little living laboratory. It's this place where we say, hey, how's this doing? And is it doing better in the Arboretum or here? In fact, we'd love to say Arboretum in Chestnut Hill, New Bolton Center out in Chester County, and, our campus in the city. And we've sort of informally planted a couple trees in all places and see how they're going to do in those different environments. And I'd love to have that as a growing, more research oriented program, because it's a great thing to see urban, kind of suburban and rural. And we could actually see how they all do at different places. But I think the diversity thing is just great.
That's fabulous that you're doing that. I bet you there's no other universities out there doing the suburban, urban, and rural experiments at all. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. One of the questions I have for you is, are you helping with assisted migration?
Wait, what's that mean?
Assisted migration meaning helping southern species come north. So like you were just talking about the live oak, and I'm thinking to myself, if Penn has something from Richmond, that's a really big thing, because you're helping plants that would otherwise not be able to get here because they would come through migration of animals, and there's too many roadways for animals to get.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, so I suppose we are with that, the live oaks. And I'm just thinking of some of our cherries and magnolias. We used to have, well, I guess, what was the magnolia that used to flower? I can't remember. Was it the cultivar Jane of the what was it? Anyway, it used to come out. Then the frost came and killed it. And that happens with magnolias a lot. But, a lot of times some of the mags bloom a little earlier, and then we get a frost and they die off. And I have to say, over the last 10 years, I haven't seen that happen. And I can look up, I can't remember, but there's a more southern Magnolia Soulangiana that we planted a few years back. And I know that they're doing great. I wish I should have figured that out for this, but that's something that has been doing well, and like the live oaks and, even what are the big guys? The
sequoias?
Flowering either.
Oh.
No, I'm thinking of the flowering trees. They're pink or they're white, and they're southern and they're
crepe myrtle.
Oh, crepe myrtles.
Crepe myrtle. Sorry, crepe myrtle.
That's okay.
And, years ago, one of the folks at the school, in the Wharton School, asked if we could plant some there because they were from the South, and we did. And they didn't do that well, but we kind of planted more since then. And I swear they've also done really well. And I mean, it's, I'm not sure it's a good thing that they've done well, but we certainly brought those species up here. And, I'm not sure I love them, but hey, they have interest and they bloom and they're pretty. And even trees, I don't know if I like, if they let people pay attention to the landscape more, that's good for me.
Well, and I also think that people have connections with things in their own home states, like you said, and they come up here and they're working here and they don't see something familiar. Putting something familiar makes them feel like they're at home.
And again, when they feel like they're at home, they own the landscape. And when they own the landscape, they respect the landscape. And I find so important.
Bingo.
So important.
Bingo.
Wise words right there. And, again, with this southern trip that we just finished, a couple days in Savannah. So just say, if live oaks take off on the Penn campus, man, that is going to be a game changer, because what a species in terms of dignity and this presence of legacy, instant legacy, just the way they sprawl.
I'll just say I'm sorry, though, to see the loss of, not complete loss, but the sugar maples aren't doing so well anymore. And I think it's our state tree, isn't the hemlock? It's too bad.
Yeah.
Hemlocks are beautiful trees and we cannot get them. I think they're just definitely getting more, there's too many pressures on them to do well. Now we do have a couple Chinese we got on campus. Are they going to do well? I don't know. We just planted them. So that's another species that maybe, I know that's a more southern in China species. So it probably will do a little bit better. Not sure it's the same as the
It does well.
American hemlock.
It does well in our area because we have them at Longwood that were planted to replace our native hemlocks.
Oh, do you?
They are doing fabulous.
Okay,
There's a case. Look at us with the taxodium. We brought that up from southern Delaware, or the metasequoia from China, which has done extremely well for us. We've lost a lot. I was making a list the other day because I'm going to be talking about it at the Pennsylvania Landscape Nursery Association's conference coming up. And the whole idea of helping to assist migrate because of what we've lost. We've lost a lot. Look at all of our spruces, our firs that we can't grow anymore.
Yeah.
Those are all things that we don't have any of those evergreens anymore. So southern magnolia is perfect, right? Or the evergreen swamp magnolia.
Yeah, we just had a guest kind of endorse firsthand southern magnolia can work as a street tree as well.
Really? Wow.
That was interesting. Yeah. I think he was seeing it in New York City.
Huh. Which magnolia?
Not
a
grandiflora.
Grandiflora?
Yeah.
And they have them in Los Angeles too. They're using them in LA. They're amazing. I was like shocked. Was one street we went down. All the trees on there were southern magnolias.
Wow. We have a lot of southern mags on campus.
Yes.
They've done well. They've done well on our campus, actually, ever since years ago.
You had mentioned Penn Park with the time that we have left, Bob. Can you tell us a little bit about Penn Park and what it meant for you as a landscape architect to have such a big parcel of land to work with and develop not only design standpoint, but the species list?
Wow, it's been great. I'll tell you how. We had 24 acres of asphalt. It was the U.S. Postal Service, sort of a sorting building there and a parking lot. And it was maybe not 24 acres, but it was like 22 acres of asphalt. And it's amazing how every time it rained, all that water went across the asphalt over the Schuylkill Expressway, the local highway, and into the river, or flooding the Schuylkill, and doing, it's a major highway going through there. And when we got that project, we had this, it was almost like this little kid in a candy store, because you can say, wow, we had to put athletic fields in there. That's true. We have a couple soccer fields and there's synthetic turf because of all the use we have, and some tennis courts. But, really, we have acres. We've ended up with 6-7 acres of meadow. We ended up with 5-6 rain garden, sort of stormwater collection areas, whatever you want to call them, eco swales. And, this, as well as lawn, as well as some natural areas, like there's a railroad freight line that goes through the area. And underneath that freight line used to be either parking lot, asphalt, or turf, lawn. And under those areas, it's not really used. We've established an incredible we've left to go. And it's kind of like a meadow, kind of like we have small trees coming in there that our bird and animal friends just sort of deposit there. And we've kind of let it go. And it's amazing how many birds have come back. And it's amazing what the environment can do. If you build it, they will come. We had somebody found a turtle down there in one of our wetlands. And we're thinking, wait, how does a turtle get here? And I'm still not sure how a turtle got there, unless somebody put it there, but it was a wild turtle. So it was like, people don't usually do that, like one of the old box turtles, which I hadn't seen in a long time. And, there weren't groundhogs and things like that there at the time. There weren't rabbits. And all of a sudden we see these things happening. And, so this 24-acre park became, like I said, a kid in a candy store. You could design a cool little field. You could design some meadows. You could put in this huge tree collection, which is 100% native there. They're doing well. We can put these little sort of wild plantings under the railroad tracks, and you can start to kind of influence some of them by trying out things. We've tried a lot of perennials out there. And it's funny, sometimes we put in annuals, and we still plant annuals. People love the pot. That's something that we kind of work against, but it's okay. It's not that big a deal. But putting some annuals in those native places, people mistake the annuals for perennials if you sort of plant them wild-like. And so it all of a sudden gives the annual kind of I'm not sure if it's a battle or the way they are looked at, but it gives them a little bit more, I don't know, what's the word? Important. They're flowers too, and then they kind of do what they do.
Right.
And it's great to see how you can sort of marry the perennial wildness with annuals and they sort of boost each other up. And I think it's great. So I think Penn Park has been just fabulous. And the students have a place to just sort of do their stuff. They can go down there and have picnics and throw frisbees and just sort of walk their dogs. And that open space has meant so much for Penn campus in allowing us to have that campus as an open space. And it is an open space. We have some designs for buildings on part of it, but, pretty much it's going to be there for, I hope, years to come.
I like annuals, Bob, because they allow a little bit of irony into the garden. When you go to the garden center and you see those old school petunias that are variegated, that look like candy canes and stuff, I think you're right. There's still a place for annuals.
Oh, definitely. And people expect that, graduation, grandpa and grandma is going to come here and they want it to look nice and pretty and do look nice and pretty. This has to be managed well. They do. That's just, it's all about the management of it. We just can't throw them out there and, they have to be done well. And I think that's fine. That's fine.
I'd like to ask you about one last garden. Probably you aren't expecting, but you and I have had some fun conversations about your own home garden. Can you tell a little bit about that?
My home garden. It's a big experiment. About an acre of land. And what is my home garden like? It was just a lawn with a bunch of trees around. It's actually an old property. The house hasn't been chewed up over the years, but I have an old horse barn on my property and I have an art studio there and a bunch of stuff there. But, I think it's an experiment. I have I planted a couple of crepe myrtles here. I have southern magnolias here. I have a lot of different plants. And I think while they're not clipped and maintained, and it doesn't look like Longwood Gardens for sure, it's great to be able to have a place to do a lot of different things. And it's almost an acre, not quite an acre, but to have these different little environments, I think is great. We have a vegetable garden and I have a little place where there's a meadow and I have a place that sort of holds a lot of runoff and water. And it's really great to be able to have a very versatile thing. It used to be a big lawn. Now it's hardly any lawn left. Having these different places to experiment with, and some work and some don't. And the things that people planted before, I'm, cursing every day, but that's the way it goes. There's a couple of Leyland cypress here one fell over and almost hit my house. And I think they're not the greatest tree in the world.
They do not. They will wind throw very easily because they have such a shallow root system. Yeah, that's right.
And the one that blew over had very shallow root system.
Right. So now, can you tell us what your favorite tree is?
I grew up with a white oak in my backyard, so it's probably a white oak. I don't know if that sounds too... Everybody likes white oaks.
Everybody likes white oaks, but that's okay.
But I love that tree. I think where I grew up, it was a suburb rural area and it had been in a forest. It was left over. They cleared it for pasture land. And so it was one of the few that were there. And it was big, tall thing. We used to climb it all the time. And it was just a great tree. But we don't have any of those. And like on campus, when I think about the trees, other than the big American elm we have on College Green, that's almost, 150 years old almost by now. I love those tupelos. We have a group of tupelos by 34th and Walnut. I think when I started there in the 80s, they were probably 4-inch. And again, they're a grove. Now, after all these years, they've grown probably to like 9-inch. And I'm not sure why they've grown so slowly, but they're a great little grove of trees there. There's probably 4 or 5 of them together. They're fabulous fall color, unbelievable. And they're just a mainstay. And I'm not sure why they haven't grown that much, but I just love those guys.
They're not fast growers.
Yeah.
They're not fast growers.
Yeah.
And I know when my aunt she had a natural stand of them on her property, there were like maybe about 80 or 90 of them. And the oldest one, when they finally had to cut it down, they found out it was over 350 years old and it didn't have a really big circumference. It was, It was maybe about 2 feet across, maybe. And so that's really, they're very slow growers, but they're mighty when they're together.
They really are. They're almost, as a grove, they're almost like one tree. And I love that about them.
Good guess. I also just quick comment. We just finished talking about Penn Park, and it strikes me, Bob, that some of those tiny forest principles were implemented. As I, know what I know about Penn Park, things did get planted kind of clustered fashion.
Yeah.
And I think that pays tribute to the fact that trees like to be a little bit crowded and keep each other as companions.
Yeah, and that was a conscious effort for sure to create those environments. And I think that's worked tremendously. No question about it.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience at Penn, and we're delighted to have you on.
Oh, thanks so much. I appreciate it too. And I had fun. I love your questions. This is such a great project.
Great, Bob. Well, enjoy the weekend and our weirdly warm Philadelphia winter.
Yes, you bet. Okay.
Take care.
You guys do too.
Bye.
I'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Plant a Trillion Trees podcast is edited by Andropogon Recordings in Hollywood, California.